What's up, everybody? Matt Kajeski here, back again with the Stokastic DFS channel. Today, I'm talking some college football DFS ahead of the two-game Friday slate. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you today by No House Advantage, and they're bringing a new and unique way to play player props. A couple things they have on the platform. First, they have a Verse the House feature. This is where you're making lineups of player props. And just like it sounds, you're playing Verse the House, the lines they set, which you can take advantage of. We have projections for most of the major sports, which you can cross-reference against these lines. But they also have pick'em contests, which are more like DFS tournaments, where it's you versus other people. You're making lineups of player props on a confidence interval. The ones you're most confident in go up at the top and so forth. But big thing here, these contests are overlaying almost on a daily basis, and they're big prizes. They've done as much as $25K up top. What does overlay mean? It's basically a contest. Maybe it's sized for 1,000 people, and it has $1,000 in total prizes if it were like a $1 tournament or something. And if 1,000 people don't enter that contest, if it's 500 people, they still have to pay out $1,000 in prizes. It is essentially free money that they are giving away to help acquire new users, and it's fun. It's player props. You know, and you love them already. And better yet, first match deposit bonus up to $50. So take advantage of that by clicking the link in the video description below. Bring you behind the scenes. We have two game slates, no FanDuel pricing, of course, but DraftKings, they have pricing out. So we'll talk about them. First game is Houston taking on Louisiana Lafayette, 7-point spread in favor of Houston, 56 total, pretty generous. Under is taking money, but overall should be competitive. Houston, they're 52nd in pace, 57.6% pass rate. Clayton Tune has said he's playing in this game, which is impactful. He is a very, very good quarterback play, and he immediately stands out as a top 2 option, assuming he gets full run. Good mobility, 489 rush yards on the year, averages about 320 as a passer on 39 attempts. Louisiana plays really good defense overall. They're top 30 in both run defense and pass coverage, but they haven't played any good teams all year. Wouldn't really be too worried about those metrics. Houston should be able to move the ball, assuming they're motivated. In the backfield, we've had Stacey Sneed miss time for this team. He's now at a month off, so I'm guessing he comes back here. But the real story is they've been using a committee. Former lead back Brandon Campbell only has 6 combined carries over the last 2 games. He's been banged up. He should be healthier now. Tazon Henry's actually been the leading back. He has 11 and 9 carries. So, I mean, you can still see this is a pass-based team. They very rarely are using running backs. But if Sneed is back, which is a name to monitor here, I fully believe this is a 3-way committee. And honestly, when you look at efficiency, Sneed has been the most efficient, and he's probably the best bet to get to work, assuming health. He has 492 rush yards. You have Campbell at 390 and Tazon Henry at 319. It's just Sneed has flat out been the most efficient back. And assuming the coaches are rational here, he should get the work if health permits. In the receiving game, Nathaniel Dell says he's going to play in this game. Now, if he plays, he's as close to a stone lock as you could possibly get at wide receiver. Averages 113 yards per game on 12 targets, but more importantly, over the last 4 games, that target average has jumped up to 15. He should be 10K, flat out. From there, things get a little interesting. We had, those of you will remember clearly if you played regular season DFS, the Sam Brown chalk week. There's a big empty square on your screen if you're listening in podcasts. You'll know that Sam Brown went from 9 targets to 11 to missing the game. No one knew. And then 5 targets. So that's the thing here. Houston has a shit beat reporter, and he doesn't do his job. If one of these players, say Nathaniel Dell, is out, you're not going to know. He does not do his job, and you're going to have to live with that. But assuming Dell plays, he'll be out there every single snap. Samuel Brown, to my knowledge, is not injured anymore. He went from playing at least 90% of the snaps in 4 straight games to the game he missed, but he immediately came back to 86%. Sam Brown's the clear wide receiver 2 if he plays. Now from there, you have Matthew Golden. He should operate as the 3. He'll rotate a little bit with Keyshawn Carter, but Matthew Golden is a bit ahead of him on the year. They have the same amount of targets, but Matthew Golden averages 5.3 per game. To Carter's 4.4. Matthew Golden did miss a spot in the midpoint of the season. He's also been more efficient. But, if you're looking for cheaper plays, Samuel Brown projects better than Matthew Golden in a vacuum, and it's not particularly close. From there, you have Christian Trayan at tight end. His route share is not 100%. He actually was down at 41% in the most recent game, but that'll ebb and flow a little bit. The game prior, he was at 67%. He's just a little bit of a cut below these other players, only 2.5 targets per game on the year. And from there, there's not really too much to worry about. Peyton Sawyer occasionally gets on the field, but these are just very, very deep players to maybe use if you're playing large field. Louisiana Lafayette, they're 49th in pace. They have a 51% pass rate. Their starting quarterback, Ben Wildridge, is injured, and that's a bit of a problem. They go to the non-mobile Chandler Fields, who was 55 yards on the year, more sacks than scrambles. That's also an issue. The passing stats for both of these guys are muddled because they split time through most of the season. Fields only averages 135.5 yards per game on 22 attempts. Even though those are a bit muddied due to the rotation, it should tell you he's not very good. The efficiency is poor for Fields. Also, he's not the most mobile here, so there should be concerns. He's the fourth quarterback on the slate if you were to rank them all. Backfield is a committee, and it could be bad. So in the most recent game, we saw Chris Smith handle 13 carries, Draylon Washington handled 10. Well, that was with Terrence Williams out of the game. He did not record a single snap, which if he plays in this game, he'd seen double-digit carries in 3 straight. And it's kind of a homecoming for him. He's a hometown guy. I believe he's from nearby. So this should be... He's also been quoted in interviews. I fully believe he's going to play. And then Jacob Kibodi, he hasn't played in multiple weeks. No injury update on his status. I wouldn't expect to see him leaving this to more of a 3-way committee. I think you're looking at a projection of around like 8 to 10 carries a piece for each of these guys. Smith is very expensive. That's the big difference here. That is in line with efficiency. He has 577 yards. And then you've got Terrence Williams at 365, Draylon Washington at 336. Washington's done it on the fewest carries, so he's very interesting to me at 3,400 if you need a punt play. But ultimately, I think these guys are somewhat efficiently priced, with Washington being a bit underpriced and Smith being a bit overpriced, Williams being pretty efficient. Receiving game is where we might get some leverage here because we've had 2 absences. And again, take this with a grain of salt because we had the Western Kentucky situation a night ago where everybody's in the portal. They all play for some reason. No beat reporting. Michael Jefferson is going to the NFL draft, and he said he's not playing in the game. So just watch this. Watch everything from now on. He recorded 810 yards this year, so that's a big loss for them. They also had Dante Fleming enter the portal, and as Western Kentucky proves, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not playing. I would bet strongly against it. But if anything, Fleming, he's more impactful here because he should condense routes for other players. So what does removing Jefferson and Fleming do to the offense? The previous wide receiver one, I guess I should say outside of Michael Jefferson, this had been Peter LeBlanc recently in terms of routes. He'd been above 50% in 4 straight games. I think he probably takes over as the wide receiver one here, averages 3.8 targets per game in the last 4. Number 2 for me would be Errol Rogers at this point. His routes have ebbed and flowed all season long, and he's actually been pretty down lately. He hasn't eclipsed 33% of the routes in 4 straight weeks. But again, we're now removing Jefferson and Dante Fleming. Outside of that, things get very tricky. So if I'm ranking Errol Rogers is the 2, Peter LeBlanc is the 1, I think we're probably looking at like John Stevens as the 3 to some degree. Jacob Bernard is going to be involved in this. And then from there, it gets very tricky. What you might also see is more multiple tight end sets. We've seen Neil Johnson. He's been floating around 50% of the routes pretty consistently over the last couple weeks. Pierce Michael, around 35%. And Johnny Lumpkin, around 35%. So these are all names to mention here. To rank them overall, I'm going to stick with Peter LeBlanc 1, Errol Rogers 2. Then we'll go John Stevens 3, Jacob Bernard 4 among receivers. For tight ends, prefer Neil Johnson to Pierce Michael, then down to Johnny Lumpkin. Very close between those last 2. Going to the second game. Missouri takes on Wake Forest. 59 total, 2-point spread in favor of Wake. They've taken some money. Missouri has a lot of opt-outs, especially on their defense. We'll talk about some skill position players they're missing too. But let's start out with this Missouri side. 97th in pace, 44.5%. Pass rate, nearly 45%. Brady Cook's their signal caller. He's more of a game manager, but he's mobile and he has solid mobility. 547 yards on the ground for him this year is pretty good. And then he averages 210 as a passer. Wake Forest actually plays pretty good defense, but they're weaker against the pass. So if Cook has efficiency and he can open it up, that Wake pass defense can be exploited. The problem is he loses his number 1 receiver, Dominic Lovett. He hits the portal. He loses his number 4 receiver in Towski Dub, who also hits the portal. Luckily, he still has Luther Burden, who's the former 5-star freshman. Did not have the best season. He'll occasionally get carries. He averages just shy of 30 yards per game, but really inefficient season from the 5-star. You'd hope to see more, and maybe he's grown. Barrett Bannister should take over for Lovett. He's been way more involved than Luther Burden down the stretch here. Last 4 games, Bannister 7.3 targets, Burden 4.8. Yeah, it hasn't been great for Burden on the year. The wide receiver 3 should pretty clearly be Mookie Cooper now, assuming no injuries, no more opt-outs. Again, this is presuming Towski, Dove, and Lovett do not play in the game, which I would anticipate. Cooper, he's actually been more of a burner for them. He averaged just shy of 20 yards per game on 2.1 targets. But this guy is going to be more involved here. He's 3.8K. I think you could use him near the stone minimum overall if you're looking for a punt play. From there, Missouri is tough to target in terms of their tight end. I think if you're looking at one, it's probably Tyler Stevens, but this is a pretty even rotation between Kebet Chepiater, excuse me for that name, Ryan Horskamp. I'm not playing a tight end unless absolutely have to. But we skipped over running back. Let's go back there. On the year, lead back Cody Schrader averaging 15.3 touches per game, 57 rushing yards. That's changed. They're not using a change of pace whatsoever. Nathaniel Pete has been benched. He's just a change of pace at this point. Hasn't seen more than 3 carries in at least the last 4 games as far as the date on the screen goes back, but I know it's even more than that. Elijah Young, BJ Harris, Tavorius Jones, none of these guys are involved. It's the Cody Schrader show at 5.2K, even in a tougher matchup. Wake plays decent run defense for what it's worth. He's targetable here. Wake, pretty intact. They lose a couple corners, but that's the weakest part of their defense anyway. Offense is pretty good. Lose a couple backs. We'll talk about them. 9th in pace, 50.5% pass rate. Sam Hartman's playing. He's going for some records, so I'm anticipating him being full go here. Missouri's losing some defensive backs too, so maybe their secondary is a little more open to pick on here. Hartman, 8.4K. He's a top 2 quarterback on the slate. It's him. It's Toon. Hartman averages 311 yards per game, somewhat mobile. 114 rush yards for him on the year. Solid. And then his receivers. A.T. Perry's preparing for this game too. He's averaging 13.5 targets over the last 4 games, 9.6 on the year, 82 yards. He's another receiving stud you can take advantage of clearly. From there, it's a bit of a mess. Donovan Green has been second in terms of routes. He only averages 4.8 targets per game. 3 has been Taylor Morin. He's averaging 7.3 targets per game over the last 4. 4 has been Jamal Banks. He's volatile up and down, but he's had a solid year. And then Keyshawn Williams is 5, and he also averages 6.3 targets per game. Once you get behind A.T. Perry, it's very volatile, and these routes ebb and flow. These targets ebb and flow. The only thing to mention here is Jamal Banks did not play in their last game. That's something to monitor. Lastly, Blake Whiteheart, he's the tight end. Had a 6-target game in the finale, but he's only averaging 3 on the year. He's clearly a cut behind the receivers. Then to finish this out in the backfield, they use a 3-man committee all season long, but probably something to do with it. The 3-man committee is now down to 1. Christian Turner and Quentin Cooley both hit the portal. Probably not happy with the 3-way committee. But that leaves Justice Ellison for a larger workload overall. He averages 13 touches in the year. He's the most efficient rusher. You don't really get any pass game work out of any Wake Forest back, so that's an issue. But he's primed for a pretty good performance here. The only thing you're worried about is how much do Damon Claiborne and Will Towns get used? They only have 14 and 12 carries in the year, but they're both going to play in this game, presumably. And Wake Forest in the past, when guys have been injured, rather than feeding one back, they've shown a willingness to just bring the next man up and continue the timeshare. That's a worry here. Makes Towns and Claiborne GPP plays. No real preference between them. Claiborne has seen 2 more carries if you want to use that as a tiebreaker. But Allison should be a pretty good play here. And that'll do it for us. 2-game slate. Thank you guys for watching. Hit the thumbs up button on the way out. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about these games. Otherwise, if you want to reach out, I'm on Twitter at Matt_Kajeski. We'll be doing these all throughout bowl season, so stick around. Until then, good luck, everyone. We'll see you later.